Mr. Castro. How are you?
Good to meet you.
I am a former parishioner, and in fact, I was married at this church. But when I was a little boy, we lived on Ware Street, and my abuelita had a neighborhood escuelita back then. She started probably in the early 30s, and she operated it for generations into the late 50s, early 60s. So a lot of the people that have attended the church over the years attended her escuelita before they started the public school at Garfield. Okay. And of course, she was very religious, and she had an altar right there in her front room where their classroom was. And every Sunday she would come to church to St. Joseph, and as a little boy I would accompany her. And I was telling them that church was and Mass was very serious to the elders, and they made sure that they kept all the kids in line. And don't you even think of cutting up. So it was some great experiences. She would recite the rosary every day.
God bless you.
Yes. And so she opened that escuelita with a mission of educating every kid in the neighborhood, and provided a lot of good services. So a lot of the people that attended here and remember her. And so they're a crew out of El Paso that are doing a documentary on it.
Praise the Lord.
Yes, and they interviewed a number of individuals that went to her escuelita Friday and yesterday, and now they're getting shots of the different points of interest in the neighborhood.
Well, we thank God for your grandmother, matriarch of your family, a pillar of faith, and may the Lord's blessing continue to abide on all your family, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Good to see you, sir.
Appreciate it.
Y'all have a great day. Good to see you. Thank you, brothers.
And so, what was Doña Tomasita's mission?
To make us love to learn, to get educated, so we could progress in life. She told us the importance of education.
Because there was at that time, and I remember walking into, the first day I walked into Doña Tomasita's class, La Escuelita de Chihuahua. It was like the little red schoolhouse then. And I walked in, and there she was, petite, with the high collar, white blouse, and always very just a beautiful lady with a long skirt and everything. It was beautiful with a little bun. Typical teacher that you would always want to be like her. That's why I became a teacher.
Really?
She influenced me so much.
Really?
She was very strict, but I never got in trouble because I was very into the educational part of it, and she taught all grade levels at one time. And if you were slow or not slow at that time, or special ed, or if you had ADHD or anything, we were all the same. We all learned the same.
My parents built their house right there in that location, and then my abuelita's house was right there, and the only thing that separated them was this driveway. So and I would get up in the mornings before I started public schools. As a child, I would get up, cross the driveway, and go to my abuelita's escuelita. And if that wasn't in session, then I would just come over and visit with her. And I mean, I loved coming over, and I could still picture her gentle face and her smile. And she would always have something for me. And she had a wood stove and kerosene heaters and kerosene lamps. And that was her lighting and her cooking facilities. But it was terrific. I would come over and she would fix something for me, or we would just be there talking, and she would be telling me stories, and she would she'd give me consejos, and she would tell me stories about Puebla and about when she lived in Puebla. She described her home, and I remember her talking about the high walls that went around their property, and the doorways or the gateways going into the property. She referred to them as portones.
Of course, that was a question: how many of your family members went to the escuelita? And of course, there were 4 of us in our family, and all 4 of us went to the escuelita. Right.
Let me ask your name.
My name is Filemon Ortiz.
Okay. And your other family members that went?
My oldest sister is Norma. She was the one that went first, then my Esperanza, my sister, and then myself, and then my brother Abel. Yes.
Okay. And you lived in the neighborhood?
We lived about a block and a half from where the escuelita was located.
So when you went, how old were you?
I kind of estimate, I think I must have been about 5 years old. So that must have been like 1947.
Wow.
Right.
Wow. Did you go 1 year, 2 years?
I think it was 1 year.
Was it in the summers or was it during the school year?
During the school year, because during the summer we would go up north, either California. Of course, at that time, the cotton season was, to clean up the plants for the cottons used to be very popular. So we would spend the summer working up north or in Texas, and of course that's one thing that we learned. You learn how to work hard, and you stay with it.
Well, did she charge? I thought she charged.
Yeah. That was her business. Do you know what she charged? Do you have any idea?
I have no idea, and that was one of the things that I was thinking about. I was telling my husband, it had to have been important for my parents because we were poor.
Yeah.
And yet they sacrificed. It was a sacrifice, but they knew about sacrifice.
Yeah.
They sacrificed however much it cost to send me their treasure, because we were treasures to them. I was to my parents.
Wow.
Okay, to send me to the school so I could have a good beginning. They knew that it wasn't going to be in Spanish when I went to school. They knew that. They were 100% certain of that. But one of the things that I have learned since, my mother was very Baptist. Okay.
Oh.
She just replaced her Catholicism with Baptist. Yeah. And I've never been very religious. To this day, I'm not religious. And one day I was talking to my husband. I said, "You know what? I think I know what I call negative experience, how I can turn that negative into a positive." And he says, "Oh yeah? How's that?" Everything was done in Spanish. All the lessons, the sermons, the Wednesday night prayer meeting, the training union, the Sunday school, everything was in Spanish. The pastors were from Mexico, from the interior of Mexico. So their diction, their Spanish was a lot better. They were sometimes dumbing their Spanish down. She was part of this Doña Tomasita, because she was from Mexico originally, right? She was from Mexico. So I said, this is what it gave me, because I've always taken pride in the fact that I'm bilingual, fully bilingual. I read, write, and speak Spanish, right? Fully, all across the board. And that's what my mother's religion gave to me. My Mexicanness, my culture, my pride in my culture.
Did she come from a family of means?
She had some means. I don't remember exactly what her family did, but I believe that they were a business family. She married, and her husband, I'm told by my brother that they had a bakery. But she married twice, and both husbands died. So somewhere along the line, I understood that there was also hotels involved. And so that she lost her parents, she lost her husband, and she lost her second husband. And if you remember, during about that time was when there was yellow fever plagues were going on. So they claimed her family, and then also that was during the time of the Mexican Revolution, and Madero y Pancho Villa y Diaz, and all that was going on. So she made a decision that she wanted to provide a more stable and better life for her and her child. So that's when she decided to relocate to the United States, and Mike ended up in Del Rio, Texas, and that's where she built her story in her life.
Doña Tomasita had a little escuelita on Ware Street, around like that, and Pierce Street, perpendicular to that. I lived on Pierce Street. Just crossing the street, 2 houses down.
Okay.
I would just cross the street up there to La Escuelita.
And your brothers and sisters went?
Beg your pardon?
Your brothers and sisters went?
I don't recall, Homero, I don't recall, I don't know. I can't tell you if maybe the one that I came after, my brother, he might have attended that I recall. The other one, or the older, they might have been with her too, I don't know.
What'd you learn there?
Whether it was Doña Tomasita, well, the main thing I think was, like I said, I was maybe 5 years old, 6 years old. Most important thing that I learned from at Doña Tomasita's escuelita was how to interact with other students, or how to work with other students, and in a harmonious way, you might say, in a harmony. And because even though those students that went to school with me there, they were from the neighborhood, from the barrio, yet we knew the names, but we didn't associate too much. We played around, you know, but some lived another street down the road, you know. But I got to learn how I could work with other students, interact with them, and that sort of prepared me to when I would enroll in public school in first grade. That's it. And I learned that much, and of course, what Doña Tomasita would teach us all. Now, you know, she was, I can recall that lady, a slender lady, you know, very articulate, I'd say, more so in Spanish, mostly in Spanish. And I remember the ABCs, the numbers, and try to teach us the sound words, trying to form words with the letters in the alphabet, you know, the sound, and try to teach us a little bit of writing and reading at that time.
From this area, from the 90s into the 50s, they all seem to have had a contact with my abuelita and were influenced by either her school or by her presence. And that's what I started to refer to was her character and her strong will and the way she carried herself. You know, she was, you know, 5 feet tall or so, but she worked. She was all. I remember her as always being straight as an arrow. I mean, she just was very formal. You know, there was a lot of class, and as she was described yesterday, she always had her clothes and her dress and her collars buttoned all the way to the top, long sleeves, button at the wrist, you know, different colors with the long skirts, and that was the image of her. But always as straight as an arrow, and the way she would deal with people, the way she would talk to people was just with a lot of class, a lot of formalities. And when you stop and think where she grew up in a social environment where that was the norm. You know, you talked with respect and talked in a formal manner, and she commanded, you know, respect. You know, just by the way she was, and you know, not only females and kids looked up to her and respected her, but grown men, and that's why she was referred to as Doña Tomasita. You know, for that respect and credibility that she established.
Why is this story important to tell?
Oh, because the whole neighborhood, that was our kindergarten, because we didn't have kinder. We went to school at 6 years old, but we went to our neighborhood, Doña Tomasita's classroom, and that's where we learned to write our name, all the letters of the alphabet, the numbers, and the vowels. She would teach us A-E-I-O-U, I-A-E-O-U in Espanol.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember taking a one of those big chief tablets and our big pencil. And I would say we would pay like, because I remember my dad giving me quarters, like probably 75 cents.
So did you cause problems in Doña Tomasita's classroom?
I might have. I might have. See, the one thing that I can remember is that to go to Doña Tomasita's school, you had to have two things. Okay, and those two things were two apple boxes. One of them you'd stand up, and that was your desk. The other one you lay down, and that was your seat. Okay, so from there you learned whatever she had to teach to you.
Thinking about my job, that if I had not known to read and write in Spanish, I wouldn't have gotten my job. And I wouldn't have loved to read my poetry as much as I do because of her influence. And again, back to the novedades, I read that newspaper because of Doña Tomasita.
Really?
And I guess she'll be with us, all the neighborhood kids, for the rest of our lives until we're gone. The memory of her.
Well, she was, you know, I would say no nonsense, and dedicated, and she wanted your attention.
When we talk about a doña, we're talking about somebody in our barrio, and I grew up in here in Del Rio in a barrio called Chihuahua, el barrio de Chihuahua, and Doña Tomasita's school was there, so she was referred to by everyone as Doña Tomasita. That meant that she was a person of authority. She was an elder of the community, and she had earned the respect of her neighborhood. And so, es una doña. In 1985, I spoke to Richard Castro, who grew up in the same neighborhood, and asked him, ¿Cómo se llamaba tu abuelita? What was your grandmother's last name? Because everybody just knew, at least I did, and most everybody that I know knew her by Doña Tomasita, no Doña Tomasita Alcina. Alcina was unnecessary.
So what was impressive? What was impressive to me was her courage and determination to be able to take on that journey. She was born and raised in Puebla, Puebla. And she was born in December of 1880. So if we use our imagination, we can pretty much visualize the time and what was going on in history during those times, in the 1880s, 1890s, as she was growing up. So she grew up in Puebla, Puebla, and if we'll remember history, the plague happened, and as a result of that, she lost her parents, and eventually she lost her first husband. Eventually, she remarried, and eventually, that husband, who was my mother's dad, also passed away. My understanding is that her parents had a retail business, and she grew up in the typical type of Puebla type homes, which if you visit Puebla, you still find the high walls right on the sidewalk. My husband died. My mother's dad, they continued to live in Puebla, but
when my mother was around 6 years old, she made a decision to migrate to the United States. Because she felt, I'm assuming that she felt that long term, they would be able to provide a better future and a better life. So, as a single mom with a little girl, 6 years old or so at the time, she started her travels, and she left friends and whatever was left of the family in Puebla, and migrated first to Monterrey and spent some time in Monterrey. Then she visited Eagle Pass, Texas. Then she was told about another community called San Felipe del Rio, which is about 60 miles or so from Eagle Pass, Texas. They're both border cities. So she traveled to San Felipe del Rio, and evidently she liked that community and took to it. So she went back to Monterrey with her daughter to get the rest of her belongings, and then migrated to Del Rio, which is how it's known today, and made her home in Del Rio, Texas. When she first got there and got situated, the way she was able to provide for herself and her daughter was by working in people's homes. And I remember as a kid, my mother talking about that part of their lives.
This was the barrio and Doña Tomasita's concept of Head Start, because Head Start really didn't start until the 60s, 64, so under the Johnson administration they started the Head Start programs. But we were going to Head Start before that, except we were doing it in Spanish, because she taught in Spanish. And so the advantage of that was, today I can see, I didn't know the advantage then, believe me, I didn't like it. Doña Tomasita was no pushover, she was tough. And I was not an easy kid, you know, but I couldn't get away with much with Doña Tomasita. You came here to do what you do, and, you know, you're gonna do it, right? Or,
were you a pingo?
You know, that's putting it lightly. But she kept us in line. There was no pushing her around. To me, today, at 62 years old, she's an institution.
Tell me about that.
Una institución in my community, in my barrio. Well, she taught so many of us, so many of the political leaders that we've had in this community, and so many of the other key stakeholders of our community. Well, her grandson is a prime example of that. You know, he's a major businessman with you know, incredible success with the McDonald's Corporation. But so many other people from the barrio that, you know, have become movers and shakers, and either politicians, elected people, or just basically businessmen and key stakeholders that are still invested in serving their community.
I admired her a lot, all the time.
Why?
Because I saw something different in her that school teachers at that time did not take time with us, because I was already in school, and since we were Hispanic children, the white teachers were down on us all the time, and she would lift us up, and she would tell us not to let nobody put you down, you know, and she would tell us that you're here for a reason and a purpose, and you're going to accomplish it. And so she would give us that encouragement, words of encouragement, which was really great.
Like the center of the barrio Why? Because that's where all the kids would go. You know, the kids that regardless of where the family lived, but if they lived in that general area, the parents would come, visit with my grandmother, register their kids, you know, for school, and then the kids would of course walk to my grandmother's escuelita. So they came from all different parts of the area, you know, in that general area that's Chihuahua. There were pockets of neighborhoods. You know, there was La Liebre, there was Comalilla, and there were, you know, neighborhoods within the general, you know, neighborhood of Chihuahua, and they all came from those different areas to La Escuelita. So there was like kind of the community center, you might say, of the neighborhood because of that. And so kids from all different parts of the area got to know each other, you know, it's little kids, because we're talking, you know, 3, 4, and 5-year-olds, and even 6-year-olds, some 7-year-olds that would still go to my grandmother's escuelita before they ever went to the public schools. So it was a very important experience.
Did it have a name, the escuelita?
No, it was Doña Tomasita's escuelita.